Aloha, everyone. Welcome to the third segment of Enlivening Southeast Asia Children's Literature Workshop. Um, and we are here today with our workshop leader, Benjamin Franklin, Benjamin Fairfield, who received his PhD and MA in ethnomusicology from the University of Hawaii at Manoa and served as a Peace Corps volunteer in Chiang Mai, Thailand from 2007 to 2009. His ongoing research focuses on ethnic identity in northern Thailand as mediated by music, with a particular emphasis on Karen music, participatory genres, materiality, and ecomusicology. He currently works at the East-West Center Education Program and serves as affiliate faculty at the University of Hawaii Music Department, where he founded the Thai Ensemble, a participatory and hands-on course where students make their own instruments from found, discarded, and recycled objects. It's really awesome. You can hear and see more of his recycled instrument projects on Instagram, hashtag MUS311 or Music311. Dear friends, please welcome Dr. Ben Fairfield.
Thank you, everybody, and thank you so much to the Center of Southeast Asian Studies for this wonderful event and opportunity. I'm sharing with you today a legend that has been turned into a children's book we're calling the Orphan's Harp. It's a legend from the Karen people, or Saga Karen call themselves Paganyo, which means human. And so this is a picture of one of our recycled instruments. It's a harp made with bike brake cables. You can see the nice curlicue, untwisted nature of them, as well as the metal, galvanized metal panel for the resonator. And you'll hear some of that instrument today in the talk. First, I'll just give a brief sort of ancestry of how we got to the current iteration of this legend from the Karen people. So, as mentioned, my wife and I, you can spot us, we're the ones not dressed appropriately from this picture in 2008 in Hoinam Khao, or Tiwaklo village in Omkoi area of Chiang Mai, Thailand. So I was there as a development volunteer, and my wife was teaching in the school. We weren't sort of musicians doing research until after the Peace Corps experience. At the very end of my Peace Corps stint, I met up with this local high school rock band and produced this album. If you want, they're online. You can look up The Dust. They've gone on to do more of their music, which is mostly sort of angst-ridden high school romance kind of death metal. And they're a really cool band, and that experience got me interested in ethnomusicology as a field. And that getting a start there instead of through the traditional music sort of gave me this perspective on how I was going to study music as an academic, and sort of acknowledging that there are these multiple streams of expression, some traditional music, some appropriated, adopted, borrowed, repurposed music. And that has been sort of the leading ethos of my study of the Karen people and their music. In 2010, so this is all Peace Corps, in 2010 I was given a East-West Center degree fellowship, graduate degree fellowship, and also got to study Thai at Chiang Mai University through a consortium for the Advanced Studies of Thai fellowship. And this is where I met Chi Suichan Patana Praiwan. He's sort of the leading artivist, if you want to use that term, sort of leading this renaissance of Karen music and tradition and a whole lot of other things. He's been featured by the center several times. He does some really great work both in the community and in academia. But I'm playing here this instrument we'll come back to called a satru, and he's playing a guitar, but he's also the lead Denaku performer worldwide. Sort of his fame is spread far and wide, and he's sort of the driving force behind a renaissance of this harp, the Denaku, which arguably had mostly disappeared from common practice by the 1990s, and has had a revitalization ever since his sort of remake of it on the scene. In 2012, he was invited out to the East-West Center, where I'm currently standing in this building, by the arts program for this Songs of Memory exhibit. And in 2014, I was in my PhD and received a flash fellowship through the Center for Southeast Asian Studies to go and work with Chi again on a translation of this work. And that was part of his MA thesis and sort of a retelling of this Karen legend of how the Tenaku came to be. And then we brought him back to East West Center when I was working here. So this was all student, and now I'm staff at East West Center. And the arts program brought him out, and he helped us finish out the Music 311 ensemble course that year with a focus on Karen music. And we performed at the center. And this is where he met one of our current students. She was an MFA student here, also a graduate degree fellowship, East West Center sponsored student. Carice, she was a playwright and a puppet master, and she took his story that I told in my class and turned it into a children's play for her MFA thesis in conjunction with Chi, in consultation with him during his visit here. And I just want to say, as I look back at all these things, we've got Peace Corps, we've got East West Center, FLAS, Center for Southeast Asian Studies. There's a lot of public support for all these things, and I have this slide here to acknowledge that and express my gratitude for the many venues that allowed all of this work to come together. And I am not interested in politics, but I just want to express that I hope these sort of programs and platforms continue in some form, because sponsoring the humanities in these higher education venues is very important to not just individual scholars' careers, but sort of this community involvement and expression, and sort of perpetuating these amazing and important stories. So Carice did her MFA thesis, and then she's now serving as the illustrator for what is becoming this book, The Orphan's Harp, that has been accepted for publication by a commercial press and will be available next April in 2026. I'll have a slide at the end to sort of talk about that. Okay, so on to a quick introduction to some of the aspects of Karen culture, or culture, that is crucial to understanding the framing of this story. So the story is the legend of the Tenaku, the harp, and how it was created and how it was used. But in order to understand the Karen people, some very important sort of foundational things should be accounted for. And number one is their deep connection to the forest, and sort of their indigenous stateless population, about perhaps 6 or 7 million in Myanmar and another 500,000 in Thailand. There haven't been, censuses conducted on the Myanmar side, so it's not really known the full extent of their population, but it's extensive. And the area that they live is along the Salween River and the Bing River in Thailand, and they're embedded sort of in these teak forest areas. And bamboo is kind of this central material that is used throughout. So Chi and I published this article about musical instruments made out of bamboo, but bamboo extends to a lot of other things: tools, everyday household items, the scaffolding for the thatched roofs. But most importantly, when a new child is born into the world as a Vaganya person, the umbilical cord is taken and stuffed into a bamboo internode, and that is tied to a tree. And that process of connecting the child to the tree is a spiritual bond as well. The spirits are tied together, and that tree is forbidden from ever being cut down. So there is sustainability and eco-forestry preservation present at the birth of a child. And the idea is that tree that will never be cut down. There are entire forests dedicated to these children that were born centuries ago, that theoretically shall never be cut down due to cultural constraints. And so bamboo is important in that venue, but it also serves as musical instruments. And so what I was going to do if we were in person today was we were going to construct these musical instruments, but I'll just demonstrate it instead. So this is the kalo, and it's based on a pig feeding trough. Initially, it would be cut a little bit deeper. You would fill it up with food for the pigs, and that was called a claw, tall claw. And so when you would call the pigs to come eat their food, you would hit this thing several times. The pigs would come running, and they would come and eat their food out of the tall claw. They turned into a musical instrument, also used for calling people with similar sounding name, kalo kalo, which is supposed to be the sound of the instrument when it's played. Kalo 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 kalo. Okay. That instrument appears in the book, and so there are several signals you can use to. This is a communication tool to call people to the village headman's house or someone else's house for various reasons. If there's a wedding, there will be a short, steady beat of just a single beat that's steady and reliable and predictable, and this is sort of symbolic of if there's a wedding, you want someone to have this steady, harmonious equilibrium sort of approach to walking together and being together. And so if you hear that one beat, you would also pick up your own glow, glow, and let other people know that there's a wedding. We should all go to that house that it's coming from and gather at that house. So that's to call for gathering. If you need to call a meeting, this one is a sonic abstraction of, like when everyone needs to pick something up and it's very heavy, you go 1, 2, 3, and you lift it up. And so a pattern of 3 in a row, 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. Sorry, I'm speaking while hitting these because Zoom might cut out the sound if I just play it, so you'll hear me humming or something while playing things today. So that's the pattern you'll hear throughout the book, a call to gather people together. The next one I will not play, hence it's written in red. If you play 5 in a row, that means that there's a funeral happening, someone has passed away. You do not hit yours in return because that will be an invitation for the spirits to come after you and bring your soul away to the next life. And so you do not hit it, you just go to the house when you hear 5. And finally, if you need help, this one represents a fast beating heart because we have this adrenaline pumping and everyone needs to come and gather and help if there's a fire or an invasion or bandits coming or something. You grab whatever you have and go and help out when you hear the rapid fire pattern. Okay, so that instrument will appear in the book. Secondly, to understand this book and what we were trying to accomplish with it is Karen oral tradition has this long history. The Karen were illiterate folks traditionally, not non-literate. And they had an oral tradition that was passed down, and it was made easier to remember these sort of poetic proverbs by making them rhyme and have this rhythmic structure at the end. And so this is a tradition called ta, and it's used at various points in rituals and ceremonies. And basically it's 7 syllables long with a final rhyming syllable. So if you think like twinkle, twinkle, little star, how I wonder what you are, 7, 7, and it rhymes at the end. So we wanted to incorporate these into the children's book, and we were inspired by this document that was originally published in 1962 by this traveling missionary Lu Shui. If you know your history of the area and the region, the 1950s to the 1960s of Thailand, it was a sort of this decade where the missionaries had been kicked out of communist China with the takeover there, and they came south. There was also a long-standing tradition of Karen missionization and conversion to Christianity from Burma, so they were also coming over from Myanmar side. And the Thai government had not yet focused their attention on the highland areas as they started doing in the 60s with the establishment of the Tribal Research Institute at Chiang Mai University. So during that decade, it was kind of all the community development work that was happening and modernization was happening through Christian missionary contact in the area. And so Lu Shui was this traveling missionary who would go around to these villages and to sort of establish his credentials. Like he would be met by a Karen sort of oral tradition keeper called a molcho at the sort of the village gate, and they would sort of have this exchange of rapid fire, like the molcho would sing out the first line of 7 syllables, and Lu Shui would have to sing out the next seven syllables and sort of complete the couplet. And he said it would take him several minutes of this back and forth before the molcho finally accepted him and let him come into the village, and then he started proselytizing and preaching Christianity. But he collected all this ancient oral tradition and wrote it down, and also decided that he wanted to make it accessible in English. And to do so, he didn't keep the 7 syllables, but he kept the rhyming structure. So you'll see things like this. He was saying the Karen have this oral tradition that would predict the future. So look, we predicted that the radio would be brought to this region, right, with the 1960s and development and introduction of these new technologies. And so he said there's this ancient tradition from the Karen people. They had this saying that said, blow the trumpet hung on a rock, the air will make a rod to talk. And of course, no one knew what that meant, but once the loudspeaker system was set up, if you go to a Thai village, you'll see there's the the Puyaiban, the village headman, has sort of this speaker at the top of their house, that looks like a megaphone, and they make their morning announcements every day. And so this like trumpet-looking thing up on a rock or a tall tower, and the air, by speaking into the air, then the trumpet would start talking, right? So he was saying the Quran predicted the radio, right? And they also predicted the other things, like they predicted the airplane. And so he would sort of translate these like rumors tell of many things that are strange. Many things that rumors tell are strange. There's a lot of wordplay and flipping back and forth. Hearing wind will come across the sea. Hearing wind will fly across the sea. Come riding on lightning and wind. Come riding crab flies on wings. And he was saying, like, this was a validation of oral tradition as new developments started happening in these villages. And a similar thing happened, I should mention this because it's probably one of the most famous Ta, with the initial missionary contact. And part of the reason why the Karen are dubbed the most successful Christian conversion case study in Southeast Asia is because this Ta sort of preempted this and allowed for a syncretization of the two traditions fairly easily. And it was this idea, this story of the white brother. So there's a Karen sort of deity, supreme cosmic life force called Yua. And Yua, it literally means flowing, like the flowing wind, the flowing water, Yuati. Yua is sort of this entity that imbues all things with life. And Yua had all this knowledge of the universe and wanted to pass it on to his children. And so he had a light-skinned child. He had the Burmese child. He had the Karen, who was the oldest child. And so Yua prepares a book for all of them. And so Yua has to leave suddenly and just takes all the books and gives them to the white brother. And he tells the white brother, look, the golden book is for the Quran, the silver book is for the Burman, and the paper book is for you. Please go give them to your brothers. And Yua leaves the scene. And so the white brother takes the golden book for himself because it's so shiny and beautiful, and he gives the silver one to the Burman, and he gives to the Burmese, and he gives the paper one to the Karen brother. And so after Yua is gone, all the brothers dispersed, and the white brother went off and built a giant industrial society with all this knowledge. The Burmese went and built this lowland kingdom with the silver book, and the Karen brother left his paper book sitting on a stump while clearing a field with fire, and that fire went and consumed the book of knowledge. And thus, in that process, they lost their literacy, they lost their chance of having a large, rich, industrious society. And the pigs and the chickens scratched through these ashes and ate them up. And so the Kren, in order to try to discern what Yua's knowledge was, resorted to gallbladder and divinations, like cutting open the innards of these animals and trying to inspect them for clues to this lost knowledge. And so with that, there was sort of this identity bestowed upon the Kren of the sort of the abandoned orphan, and all of their brothers went off and built big, amazing societies, but the Kren were left sort of scrounging and foraging in the hillsides without the ability to read and write, that sort of thing. But the Ta said at the very last line that one day the white brother will return and he will bring with him Yua's book, golden book of knowledge. Right. So when the missionaries showed up, they have these Bibles that have the gold leaf, and they are preaching of this God who in Hebrew was called Yahweh or Yahweh. And so they heard that similarity, and some of the stories sort of also linked up. There was a story of a snake, convincing a woman to eat an apple. And so those kind of syncretic linkages made for a fairly quick transition and acceptance of Christianity as not so foreign of a religion imposed upon the Karen, but one that was kind of indigenous or appropriated or indigenized to a degree. And so Ta is sort of like really infused in a lot of Karen history and even futures, right? Because people are still interpreting these esoteric ancestral poems and trying to make sense of them and using them to make sense of their current situations. So we wanted to try to capture that in the children's book, but without being so academic about it, and just sort of include this sort of notion of these 7-syllable poetic couplets. and that was the idea for the book. Also accompanying the book, I'm going to get to the book, but this is all just setting it up. We also recorded an album, Chi and I, back when he was doing his residency here. We did a couple songs, and as we were writing the book, we also turned some of these songs in these ta into music. But a lot of the melodies are based on the music of Dupo, who was sort of the predecessor of Chi, one of the more famous Karen performers of the Daenaku on the Thai side of the border. But my knowledge of what's happening on the Myanmar side is a little bit spotty. Okay. But Dupo sort of had international fame because of his music. And so the melodies that we use are based on his music. Okay. So, we are now going to begin the story. We are introducing the Daenaku. And basically the story is asking us, how did this Daenaku come to be? How come it's not played all that much or known very well anymore, even by our own people, not internationally, but even our own people don't know about it. And so this father and daughter are sitting around this campfire inside the house with the fire going, and they're at the hearth where all these conversations happen at night. And the answer comes in the form of a ta that is self-referential because it talks about the Daenaku and the satru, that bamboo instrument I was playing earlier on that slide. And so this is the first song that sort of introduces these, and I wanted to. So some of the ta are newly composed English only, but some are sort of a literized translation. It's not a direct translation of the original Boganyara language, but it is the same sentiment. And so when you see the yellow, this is Chi singing, and the white is the English, that's me singing, and we're playing the Daenaku, which is one of these homemade hardware store versions, right? So you can see the untwisted bike brake cables and the metal. So we're going to hear Chi and I introduce the Daena. Sorry.
Then the harps that twang and sing saw through bamboos either sing. Oh, that we knew how to play. Songs would fill each night and day. Some they say still play them well. Sounds that charm us as a spell.
So that lilting lullaby sort of trance-like feeling is intentional. If you feel sleepy, that's good, because this is a bedtime story to be told to children. You're trying to get them to go to bed. So the story begins, and you can take a minute if you need to read that. We'll run through that in a second. But our story begins out in the forest. The rice harvest has ended. Here are some rice paddies that are being planted, but later in the season the rice would grow gold, and once it falls down and faces downwards, then it's ready to be harvested, and it's harvested, and taken back to the village. And so this, what happens is to protect the rice paddy and seedlings from wild animals, they'll have these posts in the ground, and in between the posts are these bamboo lattice sort of pickets. And at the end of the harvest season, when you're harvesting the rice, all the pickets are taken home, they're burned at the hearth, they're used for firewood, but the posts remain out in the field year-round, because they just sit there and you add new pickets and lattices to them when you need to replant the next year. And so this is where we start to get this divide between the forest is where you grow all this food that will feed you. You take it back to the village. The village is sort of the safe place where there's no wild animals. It's also free of the more malevolent spirits, because those spirits live in the forest. The forest is a very dangerous, mysterious place. If you look at any of the plays, from the Ramayana in the region, right, the forest is that scary place where you go and you encounter ogres and giants and spirits, and you have sort of a transformation, and you return to the civilized lowland or kingdom or whatever you're returning to, the village, with whatever new skills. But no one lives in the forest full time. And so our story introduces the orphan who does live in the forest, and because he lives there, he's not really known, everyone's afraid of him, because if you live in the forest and have these contact with spirits all the time, then you must have some magical powers or else be crazy, because no one would live in the forest. It's not the place that you'd want to stick around, especially at night, where all the spirits are going to come and get you. But the orphan's there, and so everyone else takes their rice harvest. They go back to the village because they need to have a big ceremony called the wrist tying ceremony, where everyone's going to get their white strings tied around their wrist and call for blessings for the next year's agricultural success. But the orphan just stays in the forest and lives there all year. And so this song introduces that sort of context of the orphan there in the forest, where none of the people want to stick around, but that's where he's made his home, and thus he's feared and not understood. So this is our Dana made from, instead of bike brake cables, these are moped brake cables, so a little thicker gauge and some galvanized wire. But this is the song for the orphan to introduce his craziness. Is the scary place, and everyone's back at the village because the village is going to be having, since the harvest is over, the wrist tying ceremony. You already know a little bit about the wrist tying ceremony. White strings call for blessings, etc. Might be familiar to other Southeast Asian traditions. It's a pretty common animist practice. For the Karen, there's another added element to it, where in order to call for help from the lords of land and water in traditional Karen belief, you had to have the entire Dapue gathered. It's a matrilineal society where all the women in the family have a spirit, Kala, that is connected to the family spirit, sort of this composite spirit called a Bra. Okay, and so, in order for the Bra to be present, the family spirit, to call for blessings of the land, all the women have to be present, because their souls, their spirits, make up the composite spirit. So if one girl is missing, whether she's a granddaughter or an auntie, then you can't have the spirit present, you can't have them call for blessings of the land, and it jeopardizes the harvest. And if you are the sitting town lord who's in charge of all that harvest and collecting tribute from all your subjects and want to ensure to them that you are their rightful ruler and can provide, fertility for the fields, you definitely need to have that ritual take place so that everyone can have a successful year, because you're going to be extracting taxes from them, and you'll also get rich But if you don't have any of that spiritual system, you're putting in jeopardy your entire position of power and wealth and influence. And so, the problem is introduced at the very beginning of the book. He has a young daughter who's very, very stubborn, and she decides, I'm going to sleep this one out. I'm not going to participate in the wrist-tying ceremony this year. See ya. And so she goes back to her room, slams the door, goes to bed, and it's definitely a problem because you're the town lord and you want to keep your position of power. And this girl is preventing that from happening. So he takes out his galop because he needs to call people together. And so you have the 3 pattern striking to make an announcement. And he tells his people this. Pictured here is a ceremony after the rice harvest where they're offering spirits, or chickens to the spirits, if you're wondering. It's out in the middle of the teak forest, in the middle of the forest, because that's where the scary spirits are. But if you appease them, then you're doing right. Okay, so anyway, that's what's happening in the picture. But he's got his galop out, and he starts playing the pattern to call everybody together, to call a community together, asking for help. And it's 3 patterns long, says, hear ye, loyal fans, I shall tell thee of my plans. Land and water, lords demand, feast for blessing of our land. All shall gather, it must be, grandma's daughters, and at this point, the girl sticks her head out the window, says, not me, slams the door shut. Okay. So, clearly a problem that needs to be resolved. The town lord, thinking quickly on his feet, devises a solution, and it again comes in the form of a ta, and he just continues. You can see the wrist tying happening back here if you're interested. Hear ye, here's the news. This girl's not allowed to snooze. While she sleeps, the spirits hide. Crops and streams shall wilt and die. So with thee I make a pact. He who wakes her from her nap shall be given half my wealth, half my riches for himself, half my land for growing rice, and the girl to be his wife. So clearly he wants this to happen. He wants the girl to wake up. He wants his position of power. He wants his prosperity to continue into the next year. So much so that he's willing to give up half of it because he's that rich. And if you extract taxes from your subjects and you want to keep that power, you do crazy things. So without consulting the girl, he offers her hand in marriage as well. And that news spreads far and wide because everybody wants a piece of that. They want gold, they want wealth, they want land. They don't mind having this very attractive girl to become their wife when all they have to do is wake her up. So the news spreads far and wide. It reaches across ridges to the next villages over. It even reaches to the orphan who's out there still in the forest in the rice paddies. And here you can see those pickets, right, if you're blocking off a section for animals to not come on this side of the fence. So the orphan's shack is not much to look at, but it's his humble home out in the middle of the forest where nobody bothers him because they're all terrified of him. But he hears this news, and he thinks, well, I'm a person who has nothing. I have no possessions. I have no home. I have no land. I have no respect. I have no honor from these villagers. They all think I'm crazy and stupid. What if that all changed? What if I suddenly became a lord myself and had subjects and a wife, potentially a family? And then he kept thinking, like, do I even want that? Is that worth trying? And while he's thinking, he has his knife out, and as he's thinking, he's carving away at this fence post. So you can imagine it's this fence post right here. It's got a branch sticking out of it too that might have a curve. And so he's hacking away, and he eventually hollows out the entire post. It's all empty inside, and he's hacking away at it, thinking all night long, and realizes as he looks down, oh my gosh, I've created this thing that looks like a boat and has this branch sticking up out of it, and he takes some rattan and he stretches from the branch to the boat, and he takes deer skin and covers it over the top, and he basically creates from his own imagination a new musical instrument that's never been heard or seen before. And so this song sort of talks about that creation process of the first denaku ever created. And it's made with strings. The strings are made out of fishing line to sort of match the original rattan sound. So it might sound more like the Burmese song harp if you listen to it. But let's have a listen to the song about the dena being created.
Hollow like a boat she glides, deerskin roof and teak wood sides.
Tên na a pli le cho chữ đế tơ mư đề sư
From the leather shoot 6 lines toward the prow these twisting vines.
Tên na a pli le cho chữ qua đế mê se cơ na mư
Pluck the vines and strum the strings, hear their voices sing and ring.
Yơ cơ đế na se kê cú mò nơ cơ so tho cru cru
Denaku, we're plucking you, may your voice sing out gru gru.
Okay. If you can see it, this is the harp back here that I'm pointing to. The skin is a rice bag that's stretched tight, and the fishing line plus rice bag makes it a little bit mellower sound compared to the metal on metal, twangy sound of the modern denaku. Okay, so that is the Orphan creating the harp and forgetting in the process all about the contest that's happening down in the lowland area, because he's just so focused on his music and his harp and spends the rest of his week making music. During that week, all of the men from the region are thinking of ways to wake up the girl, and their strategies for how they're going to come and force this girl to wake up and participate in the wrist tying ceremony. And so this is a long, quick set of ta that has everyone's strategies. I just want to point out this picture because it's not, if you're not familiar with the area, you might get a different idea of what a mortar is. So when I mention mortar in the song, it is this large wooden log that's hollowed out with a large wooden sort of arm, the pestle, that you use your foot to step on and it pounds down. So these things weigh hundreds of pounds. You wouldn't bring them into someone's house because they would probably, the house couldn't support it being made from bamboo. But that's the last strategy. So what you see in this series of men marching up to Nachatru's house to force her to wake up are just men being very loud and smashing things and hitting things and stomping things and screaming and trying to force this girl to wake up. And a cultural norm to consider that's true for much of Southeast Asia is, one, you don't put your feet above somebody's head. So when the first guy comes in stomping on the ground, the girl's laying down and his foot is just right above her foot, stomping next to her head, a big no-no. Another thing is that if you have a spirit that resides in your body, a common practice throughout the region, and in Hawaii too, is that when you wake somebody up, you wake them up gently. You wake them up quietly, because while you're sleeping, your spirit tends to go off and have its own adventures and explore other realms. And if your spirit does not return safely to you by the time you wake up, that is one of the primary causes of disease and sickness, which is why the wrist tying ceremony, one of the primary thing is you tie the string around the wrist and you call for the spirit to come back, hake, hake, 3 times, come back and reside, be with the body again, because that's a full person that has their good health. So if you're going up there smashing and punching things, trying to get the girl to wake up, big cultural no-no. So all these men are doing it wrong, right? They're being really inappropriate culturally, but they're so focused on obtaining wealth that they don't care. And they don't care about the girl, they just care about getting riches. And so this song sort of walks through all the varied failed attempts of that process.
Yelly belly, loud and brash, hoping to collect some cash. Trots and braying like a horse, screamed and lost his voice, of course. Brawny bugler brings a horn, breathes in deep breaths to perform. Blasts a blowing, blaring beep, lips foam fuzzy, flat asleep. Doler drummer trumps up next, thinking he's prepared the best. He booms his drum loud as a bomb, breaks his drumstick, then his palm. Fooly footsie flops on up, clops with stomps and jerky jumps. Leaping, lurching, limping hops, whining, waiting, moaning drops. Pumped and clumpy, here's a porter, heaves and hauls a wood and mortar. Shakes the house and cracks the frame, daughter stirs but sleeps the same. Grumpy, growling town lord waits, different suitor, same failed fate. Shakes his head at each failed try, frowning, fretting, starts to cry.
By the way, if you're wearing headphones right now, you might hear some extra instruments that you wouldn't hear in the regular speakers from the computer. Or you can go back and listen to the recording later to hear extra instruments. The thuds and the thumping are very low frequency and don't get picked up by computer sound so well. Anyway, so all the men fail, right? And so the town lord is at his wit's end. I'm about to lose my kingdom. I'm about to lose everything. There's nothing left I can do. And one person in the crowd points out, you know, there's one thing we haven't tried yet. And the town lord thinks he knows where he's going with that. And there's one suitable bachelor left that we haven't tapped. And reality sinks in, and they realize they're going to have to go, and they're going to have to ask the orphan for help. No one would ever ask the orphan for help. You don't trust him. Also, the town lord is up here. The orphan is like down here. And so just the flipping of power structures is present here is revolutionary, right? Why would anybody go? They just never would consider the orphan as a resource because he's crazy, lives in the forest. But he's their last option. And so the town lord sends his nobles out to the forest, which they would never want to go to because they mostly stay in the central area of the kingdom and just extract taxes. They don't do a lot of work. They mostly just bloat with wealth and gluttony. But they nonetheless head out to the forest and they find the orphan. As they might expect, the orphan, in their opinion, is dirty, uneducated, and just brings with him all kinds of filth. And they find him passed out in the middle of the field, clutching this boat-looking object that no one's ever seen before. It's just, they're not convinced that the trip was worth it. But they tell the orphan, get up, you're coming with us, and the orphan decides, I don't really need to come with you. And so, again, the power structures are flipped as the men have to beg and plead the orphan, please come help us. We really need you. And the orphan decides that seeing nobles get down on their knees and beg is, okay, fine, I'll come help you. But he brings with him some sticky rice and some beans, soybeans, for the journey. And he also brings the harp. And they're like, you can kind of leave that boaty thing at home. It's not really, we don't need it. And the orphan, no, I'm not going to bring it with me. And so they have no power in this bargaining situation. The orphan has all the power for the first time in his life. And so they sort of walk back down out of the hills, sort of this parade of shame if you're one of the nobles, and the orphan is kind of enjoying this new attention that he's getting. And so he brings his instrument with him. So this is a bamboo from across the street here at UH, and some driftwood from the beach, and some plastic washers, and a Mountain Dew can also from the beach. Turned into a Dana. Let me grab a microphone to get a little extra sound on this one. Okay, so the orphan shows up, and this is the orphan's entrance into the lowland area. Racing, half past noon, spirits feast commencing soon. As the youngest daughter sleeps, mighty leader wails and weeps. Hark, the hills are growing loud, orphan's entrance draws a crowd. They're not cheering, no, it's laughter, welcome now, a sure disaster from the dirty hills he brings, muck and yuck and rotten strings. No one's convinced he's going to be of any use, because he's never been of any use to any of them for the entirety of his existence, but here we are, and the orphan's got this harp with him. We're not going to sing this song, but basically the orphan, he first tries to wake the girl in similar ways as the others, right? He's got the sticky rice, he shoves it into her mouth while she's asleep, her breathing is cut off from her mouth, takes the beans, puts them up her nose, suddenly she's choking, spits it out, pushes him out the door, says, "Get out of my house." Everyone laughs, they have a great time, and she's like, "What is with you people? Like this, why is this entertaining? Please go away and leave me alone. I just want to be alone sometimes. Don't any of you understand that sometimes you just want to be alone?" And when she says that, the orphan thinks, well, that's my entire life. I like being alone. I like the quietness of the forest, and I cherish and treasure that solitude and that serenity and that peace. And oh my gosh, look at me, like I start thinking about money just like all the others, and like within minutes, like I'm trying to biff and bash my way into this fortune just like all of them. Like, that's not right. That's not even who I am. Like, why am I doing that? And so he changes tack and realizes, like, one, the girl's actually awake. She's just really stubborn, and what she's asking for is respect and peace and tranquility. And so this is a longer ta that just basically, this is the girl's soliloquy that I'm not qualified to sing right now and don't have the instrumentation for, and the recording's still in progress. But basically she's asking, is your father ruler of land and water, skies above? What's my utility? Just come at every beckoning, like show my face and take the stage, be displayed and lead parades. Every action that I take, any choice I'm forced to make, is evaluated by this all-seeing public eye. Oh, that I could slip away, far from crowds with judging gaze, far from gawking grudged glares, far from whispered words and stares. Is there even such a place, such an isolated space, where frogs sing and slow their pace, where by nature I'm embraced? Where can I find solitude, true companionship, and food? Oh my goodness, food. Free to be and free to choose, where my spirit thrives, renewed. Can anyone relate? Can any grant that fate? Or am I only ever going to be this prize that all these greedy men are, pushing each other out of the way for? Like, is that all I am to you people? Right? This is her internal dialogue, but the orphan is also realizing that's what she needs, and that's actually who he is. And if he could just stay true to his own system of living, then they're actually a very good match. So he decides, all right, what we're going to do instead, he goes and sits outside of the bamboo wall that separates her from all the people outside. He sits up on the veranda there on the porch, and he takes out this denaku, the harp that he's created. And as he brings it out, like, the entire crowd, who's all laughing and raucous and everything, just hushes instantly. and they all sort of take a few, they sort of lean forward and sort of hush and huddle together because they want to hear this instrument. And so the orphan takes it out, and the girl's inside. She's on the other side of the wall. She can't see it, but she hears that something has changed outside, right? Something's going on out there, and she wishes she knew what it was, and she finds out soon enough, just with her ears first, without being able to see it. And it's this song that the orphan plays to everybody, but for her and to her, kind of, about her.
Kulose la tichaku, se de kevete naku, awa de kevete naku.
In the woods with streams and deer, spirits you've been taught to fear, vines that climb to reach the blue, with them make a denaku.
De le blanc naku, de le blanc le de naku, de le blanc le de naku. Rasa de nahu, ami sepe amo bon.
Play it in the forest and it resounds across the land. Hear its fame throughout the world, all will know except one girl.
So, within minutes of this exchange, the crowd went from this idea of everyone knows the orphan is stupid, dirty, uneducated, worthless, lives out there in the forest, what good could ever come from him, to suddenly being entranced, as everyone's entranced, as he was entranced when he created the instrument, enchanted by its sound, and drawn in, and wanting to hear more. Even the girl on the other side of the wall, she also felt that way. And so she's trying to figure out, what do I do at this point? And the orphan says, you guys all want to hear another song? And it goes, oh, yay, oh, bravo, hana, let's hear another song. And so he goes, great. And then he says, well, I mean, let's leave the girl alone. She clearly wants her peace, and we should respect that. So why don't I just go down to the festival over there at the town lord's main house, and I'll play you another song over there, but let's give her her space, because I think that's what she wants. And so they walk down, the crowd starts following the orphan, and as the girl realizes she's never going to see this instrument, if she doesn't come outside, suddenly they are stopped in their tracks by the sound of the girl playing her own galop from her house. And she says, wait, I'm coming with you, I want to see the Denaku. She comes out of the house, she wakes up, she participates in the ceremony, and hooray, everything's all great, right? It should be great, unless you are the town lord, who suddenly is realizing, I've made this deal, I have to give the orphan lord, now he's called, half of my wealth and my belongings and my daughter's hand in marriage, and I have to rule with this crazy son-in-law who doesn't know a thing about how to run a nation state, a state, whatever you want to call it. What does the orphan know about any of this? Like, what have I done? And so the town lord stays up all night thinking, like, okay, well, I have to keep my word, right? That was the thing that I promised. But there's got to be a way to, like, put a clause in this contract so that I can get my, take it back, because I can't have this be the situation. And so he thinks all night, and he wakes up the next morning, and everyone's gathered around the town lord's house, and it's time for the formal exchange of all these treasures. And so the town lord says, all right, so let's do this. I've got my galot here, and we're going to make an announcement. So he's little groggy, and he was trying to get people to come to his house, and he starts singing his ta to formally announce what's going to happen, and it goes like this. I, your Lord, have made a vow, half my land for thee to plow, and my daughter's hand to thee I contingently bequeath. After 3 years doth go by, should your wealth be less than mine, and it will, such shall prove your skill unfit, and ye shall surrender it. So, that's how it's going to be. Orphan, you can have half my land like I promised, but if in 3 years you're not as prosperous, you have the same prosperity as me, then I'm going to take it back. And obviously, you're going to fail at this, and I'm going to get everything back, and so we'll be back to normal in just 3 years of this situation. And some people realize, I don't know about this deal. This doesn't really seem to make sense. And everyone has these questions, and he's like, no more questions. But then the orphan raises his hand, and he goes, I have a question. And, he goes, okay, what do you want, orphan? And someone in the crowd goes, Orphan Lord! Right, Orphan Lord, what do you want? Do you want more than this deal? This was the deal. Like, what's unsatisfactory about this deal? And the orphan says, actually, I don't want half your land. I don't want these rice paddies. They're not my thing. Obviously, this guy knows not what he's doing. And I'd rather just have the forest. And so, again, the crowd kind of hushes. You just want the forest? Like, that unproductive space where the scary spirits live? You want the forest? And not the rice paddy? Like, do you understand how wealth is created in this agrarian society? If anyone here has read James Scott's Anarchist History of Highland and Southeast Asia, this is kind of where that conversation is going. Right? The way that you get rich and wealthy in this society is people grow rice. You can see what they're growing. You take 10% of their product, their harvest, and they pay that to as tribute. You conscript their people to build your roads, to build your walls, to join your army. In exchange, you protect them. Like, this is how this works. Like, if you want to make money, it's extraction. This is the system. This is what you do. What do you mean you want the forest? Like, what are you going to grow up there? You can't see what people are growing. You can't grow rice. And the orphan continues. He goes, and I don't want half your people. You don't want, like, these are your subjects. They do whatever you tell them. This is the way that things happen. Like, you tell them what to do, and they do it. Like, this is how the system works, right? You're the ruler. You tell them what to do, and that's how you prove your prosperity. That's the whole challenge. Like, and the orphan says, yeah, but I don't want to force my rulership over anybody. Like, I don't really see them as subjects, like, below me. Like, that's not how I see fellow human beings. But I'll take any volunteers that want to come and build a different kind of life, a different kind of society, a different kind of structure that's cooperative, that's rooted in nature, that's up in the forest, away from all these politics, that's just one where we live together in peace and harmony in the mountains, in the forest. And so, again, the town lord looks at him and he goes, who in their right mind would want to go live voluntarily with you up in the forest? Like, what do you have? Like, crickets? Silence? Peace? Tranquility? Pfft. And at this, the orphan, again, and the daughter, their eyes meet, and they realize they want the same thing. And so she volunteers. And then other people start to volunteer. And he's got a big enough group of people that all seem to be buying into this new way of living that's different from the conscripted labor, extractive sort of capitalism, whatever the system is of this lowland kingdom. And so the orphan has this group of people, and they say, yeah, we'd like to give this a try. And so the town lord says, okay, you can, but remember, the deal is still a deal. 3 years from now, if you are not successful like me, you don't have the same prosperity, I get it all back. I get all the people back, I get all my land, I get my daughter back. And so the orphan says, yeah, no problem. That's a great, yeah, I accept the deal still. And so they all agree, even though the the town lord thinks he has the upper hand here with his deal. So, the orphan and his new entourage and his new wife head out to the mountains, and you can see this is some of the landscape up here with the teak forest and some of the fields for growing rice. And the orphan sort of wants to put all this new, political theory into his take with a ta and a song, and so everyone wants to hear the Denaku again. So he provides that with this new ta that he composes on the spot. But in this song you'll hear a few additions, especially if you have headphones. That it's not just the Denaku unaccompanied soloist and instrument, but we've added a whole entourage of Northern Thai or Salal Sasung kind of music that's sort of rooted in the traditions of Chiang Mai, because this is the idea that these lowlanders are joining the band and going up to the hills. And so you hear some extra instruments as the orphan and his family and cohort sing about their new life and their new way of doing things.
If you're tired of making bed, you can come with us instead. Our home waits to welcome you, lush and flush with solitude. There we'll hunt and camp and feast on the blessings nature brings. Taro, rice, cucumbers, beans, pumpkins, roots, wild herbs and greens. We will work together. What we gather we will share. Onward, upward, hark, they call greetings from the waterfalls. Rivers, roots, and leaves provide all that you've been long denied. Spirits roam the forest here, but they seek respect and not fear. Many friends we've overlooked. Nature is our golden book.
So they make their way up, and they have 3 years to prove that their way of life is quantitatively better than what the town lord is doing. And they do come back after 3 years, and they have a big showdown. But that end will have to wait if you want to see how it ends. And spoiler alert, there's no winner or loser. But next April the book is coming out, and it's through Picnic Heist. They are a up-and-coming commercial press doing children's literature, and they are worth checking out or following on Instagram. So if you want to be ready for that book when it launches, it's in production now. It will be available through Picnic Heist. And I don't know if I'm early or if we want to have time for questions or discussion, but I'm up for that. But that is the end of my formal presentation of the story. So thank you so much. I haven't been looking at the chat.
Yeah, I have a question in the actually I already wrote in the chat like does it the, because I really interested in the song itself. Does it like coming from the popular song in Karen or it's like song created for this particular stories? That's my first question. And the second question is like when you do the translations because I don't know the Karen language, but I see the English language. Which one is do you think like have a kind of like a strong feeling or strong message? Because when you're doing the translation, it's you know one language can be like stronger than any, and so who's gonna be like the the audience, the most audience for this? Because like when you see how strong the feeling is, we can see like who will be your most targeted audience for this particular language.
Sure. Yeah. Thank you for the question. So for the music first, all the songs that had Chi singing along his own verses, the ones that I played, not live, but that were recorded, those are traditional tunes and traditional ta, and so it's those tunes were passed down, for centuries and have evolved to what they are. And so they're not so much the popular tunes, but there are some in this batch, the ones that are mostly in English. The tunes we based them on are from Dupo, that performer that I showed early on in the presentation, and he was a contemporary composer that did some traditional stuff, but also a lot of what's called luktung, or Thai country music, that's sort of based on a Laotian sort of driving rhythms. So he was a popular composer, composing songs on the Denaku. So his music is viewed as traditional, but also like modernized for the 1980s. And Chi Sui-chan, for his part, he also composes and writes and records his own albums, and his is also a mix, although he does more contemporary stuff that's meant to blend with other instruments and other traditions around the world. So his music is kind of more of a world music take. And so between the two of them and myself, it's sort of a negotiation to mostly highlight the text and the storytelling, but in a way that sort of honors all the various approaches. Because Chi is very clear in our public talks. He's like, I don't want this to be, something that's stuck in the past, however he defines that. And his performances, that when he was out here with East West Center, he was like, Ben, bring your ukulele along, and I kept being really hesitant. I'm like, I don't think I need to be up on stage with you, right? This isn't about, I want people to hear your music. And his response to that, which still sort of became the catalyst for a lot of what we're doing, is he's like, what do we call ourselves? I'm like, well, you call yourselves Borgignon. And he goes, what does that mean? And I said, well, that means human. He's like, okay, and then what does that mean? And I'm like, okay, well, it means that everyone has this equal sort of standing, right? The people in front of you, the people behind you are given the same sort of respect. And he's like, right, so if I stand up here and don't include you in my musical presentation, that's not traditional, right? That's not Borgignon music, because that's just me sort of being elevated up on a stage. And so his take was, if you want to express Karen indigeneity, it's not done by highlighting one person and removing other voices. And so that for me was sort of a, like, I still am reluctant, being who I am, up on stage with him, but because his intent is to showcase this egalitarian value, right? And so for that reason, we've taken this sort of approach to have this multi-musical, multicultural blend of all these traditions. And so out of respect for his culture, then I have to, I have a responsibility to go with that. And so that's where the music is sort of inspired. To the language point, right? Chi's first publication was in Thai script, but also the second half was in a Romanized Catholic script. And one of the challenges for sure with with Karen and Faganyo is that there was no written language, traditionally until the missionaries came. And when they came to Myanmar, they borrowed the Burmese script and used that to create a Karen script. But then when the Catholics came, they said, well, we should use Romanized script so that it's easier to print. We don't have to create our own typewriters. We can just use what we have. And so they created their own version. So if you're Protestant Karen, you might know on the other side of the border, you might know the Burmese-based language, and that's your writing system. But if you're Catholic Karen, you might know the Romanized, which is less popular. But it's Romanized, and the final consonant is the tone marker. And then if you grew up in Thailand, right, you might not know either of those systems. You might have been raised in Thai schools and know Thai script. And so you might be transliterating your oral tradition Karen into Thai script and writing it with the available script from Thailand. And so it's definitely the perpetual question of what language do we use, what script do we even use, because there is not one standard. There are multiple standards that different pockets and communities make use of. So for our book, the primary audience, as I imagined it, was one, since Chi has already written a similar version of the story in Thai and Catholic scripts, but not the Burmese-based Sagal script, that those stories are out there, already available, but there's a sort of a hole when it comes to third-generation diaspora Karen who are maybe growing up in the U.S. or Australia or Sweden or Canada. As you know, the Karen are part of a long-standing war for independence ever since the end of World War II, sort of fighting for their own autonomous state against the army in Burma. And because of that, there have been a lot of displaced persons that have come across the border into Thailand and then have been since resettled in these third nations, mostly in the West, Europe, Australia, U.S., Canada, North America. And so Chi really wants to do outreach to them. And so this book is servicing that population, right? It's a retelling of the story in a way that's accessible, but still linked to traditional modes and formats. So it's not just a rewriting or retelling in a new language, but it's still linked via this ancestry. But it's also meant, because it is part of this commercial press endeavor, to be a children's story that's available to a general audience, that speaks to a general audience, that isn't so, culturally specific, that it leaves people out of the picture. Again, referencing Chi's idea that this meaning to be Borneo is to have this sense of humanity built into the ethnic identity. And so you'll see this in their shirts. Even if you see Karen shirts, they have a V-neck in the front and a V-neck in the back, and that's part of the identity. Is the people in front of us, the people behind us, all deserve equal respect. I'm sorry, I keep hitting my microphone. So that is the long answer to your two questions, and thank you so much for the question.
Hi, I have another question. So can you share a little bit about education, like how retelling the story has been done in Chiang Mai, in Omgoi, in the community? Because I envision that there's a lot of popular music coming on, and then some students may not be able to speak the language or understand the language. How, like, you work with local community and artists, how has it been done in terms of like passing on the knowledge to younger generations? And also I have a question integrating those lessons to the US context. Like, do you have any suggestions, recommendation how to use the stories or the medium of education that you use as music to integrate with ethnic identity, ethnomusicology within the US educators, for US educators? Yep.
Sure. Yeah, thank you for the question. So those are both the next steps. Chi is currently, so the co-author, it's Chi Sui-chan, he's currently been developing a curriculum in Thailand that is, there's a caveat in the Thai education system that allows for local wisdom and knowledge to be infused into the curriculum. I think it's about like 10% of curriculum can be tied to local life ways and values. And so he's been making use of that. He started a demonstration school in Matdam in Chiang Mai province through his professorship at a university in Dak province. But I think he's moved now to Ma Fa Luang University in Chiang Rai. But the school still exists and will continue. And the idea of the school is working with the Thai education system, which is pretty rigid but allows for some flexibility and infusing of local culture into the curriculum. And so he's built out some Karen curriculum that, since you've only got that small 10%, like fitting all of everything you want to say about Karen culture, which is expansive, and Phil's encyclopedias has to be, this one little slice of a general ed curriculum. So in doing that, I think for his work, he sees the Denaku as really hitting on a lot of points that are very important to him, given the history of the Karen in Thailand. And so for him, the story of the Denaku is a story of sustainability, because there's these strictures and taboo that come with building a dana. You're not allowed to just go and clear cut a forest to mass produce dana. You have to wait for a tree to naturally die, or if you are going to cut a living tree, you cut it above knee height so that it can resprout, and you're not killing the actual tree. And all these really tiny minutiae and these details that sort of tell the story of sustainability is continuing to be important within the social political realities of Thailand, where since the 1960s and really into the 80s, there was a lot of misunderstanding of the highland populations on the part of the central Thai government. There were assumptions that they were called hill tribes. They're not called that anymore. It's not PC. But these populations were harboring communists who had fled into the hills and were taking refuge there. There was the association of certain types of agricultural methods like slash and burn, swidden agriculture, that was practiced by some groups, but not so much the Karen. But because there was a misunderstanding of the diversity of the highlands, everyone was kind of lumped into one overarching category called hill tribe, forest destroyer, right? And so part of Chi's motivation in telling the story of the Denaku is to reiterate the fact that the Karen have this long-standing tradition of preservation and sustainability and sort of eco-forests and ways of managing the land. That was not what the lowland authorities understood it to be. And so infusing that into the curriculum is key to that effort. And so the Dana really helps to tell that story, but it also has a lot of this other cultural lessons and values in it. So focusing on that is one way to get the narrative across in a way that's not as confrontational and not as politically charged, right? If it's music and it sounds beautiful, you have more of a chance to be heard and get your message across in subtle ways that you maybe wouldn't have so much with some of the more angry, shouty sort of ways of saying that same message. And so there's an effort on Chi's part in Thailand to sort of advance curriculum that tells these stories in a way that's consumable and not confrontational, and also keeps the tradition going. And his students are building their own Denaku, and they're exploring new things too. So it's sort of rooted in tradition, but expanding and building connections internationally with programs and fellow schools and things like the East-West Center, where we're promoting dialogue and exchange. On the U.S. side, that's also TBD, but definitely on our minds. There's going to be an accompanying book that comes out, I don't know yet the schedule, 3 to 6 months after this children's story. So the children's story is meant to stand alone and be accessible and just a nice story. But if you want some of the more granular cultural details, there's going to be an accompanying book that pairs with it that gives more context to the wrist tying ceremony, to the Karen values on what the forest is, and some of that textile and clothing and some of those things that go with the book that can enrich your understanding of the book and can be turned into a curriculum that's sort of like meant to be like a standalone, like 12-week sort of special topics course for all ages, or it could be community workshops where we're building instruments and discussing, sustainability and music as part of the ecomusicology project. But still in development, but definitely on our radar. So thank you so much for the question.
Ben, could you lift up the tenaku that you made and talk about your whole process of making the tenaku in Hawaii?
Sure. Since you mentioned... So if you're going to be specific to Hawaii, this is the Hawaii version with our spam can. But you can see the original. So this one on my wall back here was brought back from Omkoi, made by a student of ours, and you can see the tin can made from an old gas can container and the moped brake cables and the very long branch of teak or white teak wood. So in trying to adapt to local realities and materials, which was what this instrument was based on, right? The traditional denaku was made from rattan and deer skin and available woods that were in the forest. And now you rarely find those kind of construction in these communities, because as new technologies started coming into these communities, starting in the 1960s and through the 80s especially, when these development projects were happening, like you would have a bike, like a moped that would break down, and there weren't tools or mechanics or anyone to fix it, and so it would be stripped for parts, and you'd find uses for all these things that suddenly were meaningless and worthless. And so the bike brake cables have become like the standard metal string for a lot of instruments, including the sung, which is the Northern Thai 2-string double course lute. So we sort of took that idea and said, if we're going to be teaching a class in Hawaii that's trying to respect the current value of taking what's available and repurposing things and not casting things off as abandoned orphans, but finding new life and purpose for them. Like, let's use what we have here. So we have our spam can, which has a nice metal sound, and bike brake cables, not moped, because you'll find a lot of bikes that get abandoned or stolen or stripped for parts. If you're at UH campus, lock up your bikes, people. But when those things do get stripped, there's nowhere locally to recycle some of these products, and so in trying to continue that theme of sustainability here locally, then we use the denaku as our model to explore those topics and talk about trash and waste and single-use consumption in the class. And it sounds about the same as the original, because it's the same materials basically, but just transplanted an ocean away.
Thank you.
There's one more question in the chat box. I don't know, can you
Can you read it out, Ken?
Right. In practical, how do you telling the folk stories to the children with the ecological friendly music without making the students feeling alienated due to the language? Do you simplify the languages for your audiences?
Yes. So this actually was brought up in our copy editing process for the book. What I presented today was the full version of all these that have, if there are multiple verses that have Karen, because I wanted to, include the language in some capacity. But as the editors came through, they had that exact same question. They're like, I think since it's so niche and we want this book to be more globally accessible, let's include maybe the first stanza, but then the translation will get that work accomplished, and then we can include the full version in the accompanying book. And so that's kind of the tack that we've taken, and that's where we're going. But for the recordings, I thought, well, there's no space constraints, and they're only accessing the recording of these songs if they have read the book and are interested in learning more. And so what I presented today was the full extended versions of those poems. But when you see the book in print, it'll be mostly just the English for accessibility for that audience. And if the book's successful, I imagine they'll want to do some translations internationally, but I have no idea the prospects of where this book goes. But we're trying to serve a population that is underserved in this area of I've made contacts with St. Paul school districts, and there's that's where most of the resettled Karen are concentrated in the U.S., and they've expressed interest in sort of bringing this into their schools and classrooms to their students as a way for understanding Karen stories and migration stories and where they come from and what some of their values are beyond the very real narrative of displacement. Right, there are also still these other important stories that are worth perpetuating.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Ben. This has been really wonderful to hear and to see your project coming to fruition with Chi and Carice's involvement in her production of the puppet play. That was also wonderful. We want to plug your class. You have a UH music class that is on Thursdays at 6 p.m. in the music department, and students learn to make their own instruments and play them. And we've been able to see performances on these homemade instruments. It's absolutely fantastic and a lot of fun to, I think, play along, learn how to do this, and then just apply recycling to music making is really a wonderful idea. Also in the chat, I want to put there's 2 more workshops coming up with Michigan State University this week and Cornell. Also Southeast Asia Children's Lit focused. So please take a look at those. Sign up if you haven't already. And Ben, we look forward to actually having you in person doing a workshop in this next academic year. We'll get more music educators involved in making noise, or good noise. So thank you so much. I really appreciate your time and all the work you did for putting on this wonderful workshop.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.